There are two kinds of people in this country right now: those who believe and shout Black Lives Matter, and those who respond with All Lives Matter. Both statements are true, however, Black lives in general don't matter in our current systems. They don't matter when it comes to our economic, education, healthcare, criminal justice, and even housing systems. We see racial injustice still today largely due to the ideals and policies that are still in place. The disparities of inequality across our systems need to change. How do we change them? We first need to begin with awareness and education for those that lack the direct experience. So why do Black Lives Matter and not all? My timeline begins during the transatlantic slave trade between Europe, Africa, and the Americas. Goods were imported and exported in exchange for slaves. Goods like sugar, tobacco, wine, ivory, and other manufactured goods were traded amongst the three different continents. Now let's get back to the timeline. It wasn't until 1619 when U.S. received their first group of 20 slaves in Jamestown, Virginia. 10 to 12 million Africans made the voyage. 15% died during the journey due to harsh conditions. Did you know that only 5% of Africans went to U.S.? The Caribbean and Brazil were where a lot of the majority were sold to. Slavery continued its way into the 1700s. During that period, white settlers needed their help in the Revolutionary War against the British, and were promised freedom if they did so. 5,000 to 8,000 participated on the Patriot side, and over 20,000 served on the British side. Unfortunately, after the war, the infamous rhetoric, liberty and justice for all, did not apply to slaves. Next, we enter the 1800s, and we begin to see slavery as a catalyst for change. The Civil War broke out against the North and the South. After the Emancipation Proclamation was signed by Abraham Lincoln, it declared black men are now eligible to join the U.S. Army. About 180,000 black men had served as soldiers and defeated the South. Finally, 1863, slavery ended legally and the 13th Amendment was adopted. Neither slavery nor involuntary solitude shall exist within the United States or any place subject to their jurisdiction. Sorry, that was my best white man impersonation. Of course, with change comes opposition, and the Ku Klux Klan, or better known as the KKK, was born. This was a group of white supremacists that tried to reverse the policies of the radical Reconstruction and restore white supremacy in the South. At its peak in the 1920s, Klan membership exceeded 4 million people nationwide. Next, we enter the 1900s, where we begin to see progress with the civil rights movement, but are also held back because of the segregation and policies that are instilled during this time. During segregation, people of color had to have different schools, hospitals, bathrooms, and even drinking fountains. There were laws called black codes that detailed where and how someone of color could work and for how much. Voting rights were removed, and laws were put in place that limited where people could live and travel. The Civil Rights Movement was an organized effort by black Americans to end racial discrimination and lawfully gain equal rights, mostly nonviolent, and resulted in laws to protect every American's constitutional rights, regardless of color, race, sex, or national origin. Key figures include MLK, Malcolm X, Freedom Riders, Little Rock Nine, Rosa Parks, Emmett Till, the Greensboro Four, Ruby Bridges, and many, many more. Now we're up to date to today's times, where we've seen this modern term and movement called Black Lives Matter. It originated from the death of an unarmed black male named Trayvon Martin. Black Lives Matter's mission is to eradicate white supremacy and build local power to intervene in violence inflicted on black communities by the state and vigilantes. For those who say slavery happened a while ago, African Americans have been free in this country for less time than they have been enslaved. Slavery was only a couple generations ago. For those who say everyone is equal today, has no concept of the leftover actions, beliefs, and policies that are still in place today that don't prioritize black lives. Let's look at today's issues even further. There's a lot of information with each topic, so instead of reading them all off, I'll only highlight and give the overarching theme. The first area we see a large racial injustice with is deep poverty. Black workers still today only make 82.5 cents to each dollar earned by a white person. Also, African Americans are 2.5 times more likely to be in poverty as whites. These are alarming numbers. What does this mean about our economic system? Black lives don't matter to our current economic system. The next step in this ladder is education. Black male teachers make up only 2% of the teaching workforce. Something even more terrifying is the fact that black preschool children are 3.6 times more likely to receive one or more out-of-school suspension than their other white peers. What do these disgusting facts mean? Black lives don't matter to our current education system. The next category of injustice is healthcare. Over half the U.S. residents who are uninsured are people of color. Black mothers are also dying 3 to 4 more times than white mothers, not because of their overall health condition, but rather not receiving equal and adequate treatment like white mothers. What does this mean overall? Black lives don't matter in our current healthcare system. Our next pillar is criminal justice. You could argue that the inequality with our criminal justice system is the reason I'm even making this video. A 2015 study concluded a significant bias in the killing of unarmed black Americans relative to unarmed white Americans, and that the probability of being black, unarmed, and shot by police is about 3.49 times the probability of being white, unarmed, and shot by police on average. Also, the amount of African Americans in prison tripled from 1968 to 2016. Both black and Latino drivers are more likely to be searched for contraband, even though white drivers are 30 to 50% more likely to have contraband. What does this mean? Black lives don't matter in our current criminal justice system. Next, we have our housing system. A study by the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development found that people of color were often shown fewer rental units, offered higher rents, and denied more leases than whites. The fact that there's a 30.1% gap between white and black home ownership only means one thing: black lives don't matter to our current housing system. As long as the current systems are in place, this idea of white privilege will always be around. White privilege is not about the items you have, but rather the unearned, inherited assets such as social status, freedom to move, buy, work, play, and speak freely. Black people have more natural obstacles than those of whites in order to get to the same spot. We need to finally not only acknowledge it exists, but we need to create policies that support this change. What does this mean? It means black lives have to matter in order to make changes. Policies that support black lives need to be immediately put in place, and outdated ones need to be eradicated.
Thanks for watching. Like and subscribe.